Hello ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you back once again to Real Cooking with Rapid Rod. Tonight's menu is going to feature Jamaican style oxtails. Yes, I don't speak with the Jamaican accent and I have no Jamaican heritage in me, but I think I am going to be able to capture the essence of this recipe. So tonight we're going to start with, we have 4 pounds of oxtails that we're going to clean very well after we do this opening sequence. We're also going to use the following ingredients. We're going to use garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, a little gravy master to brown and for color, chopped garlic. We're going to use a green bell pepper, but I have different color peppers out here just for presentation and hue purposes, for colorful purposes. We're going to be using tomatoes, onions, and we're going to use some brown sugar. I have some pink Himalayan salt, some white iodized salt, which we're going to be washing the oxtails in, and then some flour here. Now for our vegetables and our vegetable seasoning, we're going to be using everything is going to be fresh today, and if you don't have these fresh ingredients, feel free to use the stuff that's in the bottle, although obviously the fresh is going to be more tasty, but if you don't have it available to you, feel free to use whatever substitute you have. Today's vegetables, we're going to be using thyme, some fresh parsley, fresh thyme, fresh celery stalk, fresh scallions. We're going to use a wee bit of ginger in our seasoning to kind of bring it all together, carrot, green onions, and a little lime to make the mixture all together. So with that, we basically have our opening sequence, and we hope you all kind of sit back, settle in, and enjoy this recipe of Jamaican style oxtails. Well, there's one thing I forgot to mention also. In the back line, we're going to be using butter beans at the end, because to me, you're not going to have that authentic Jamaican oxtails unless you have your butter beans. That's just a personal preference that I like. You don't have to add them. I like them though. I'm going to be using chicken broth, and you can certainly use beef broth if you have no chicken broth. Some extra virgin olive oil and a little tomato catsup. And with that, I think we've covered it all. So a multiple list of ingredients tonight, and we're going to bring it all together very nicely, culminating in a wonderful Jamaican oxtail dish. So stay with us, settle in, and we'll be right back. Okay, so we're at the phase where we're going to basically wash our oxtails, and I've already rinsed these oxtails about 3 or 4 times already, but now on camera I'm going to basically show you how I do. So we're going to, as I said, we're going to salt these down with cold water. And we're going to let them soak in this salted water along with some cider vinegar. And that should get all of the excess stuff on them that we don't want, and it should really clean them well. We're at the point now where we've washed our meat really nice, and we have it set aside in the bowl. We've chopped all of the vegetables that we needed to chop, the red peppers, the green peppers, the celery, the onion, the thyme. We've diced a small tomato, and we're going to now go ahead and begin to season the meat. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take just about 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. Now I'm going to call out the amount that you should be using, but I'm going to basically do it. I'm not going to measure this out. I'm just going to do it by sight. About 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. And this is where we use our gravy master, probably 1 teaspoon of gravy master, and this is what's going to give our meat that nice color. We're going to use approximately 2 tablespoons of ketchup, because the ketchup is really going to make it pop. And then a little minced onion. I'm sorry, a little minced garlic. Just probably about that much there. Give it that nice garlic flavor. And then we're probably going to go with about 2 tablespoons of seasoning salt. And if you don't have seasoning salt, you can use regular salt. And with that, we're going to basically get our hands all in this and mix it up nicely. We want to get all this nice seasoning all over these wonderful pieces of oxtail. And the smell that's coming off of this is really, really luscious and rich and very flavorful already. And Worcestershire sauce is really kicking. And that's basically what you want it to look like at this first stage. All right, so we mixed the first stage of ingredients in. We've mixed it all in nicely. And we're going to add now about one tablespoon of garlic powder. And maybe 1 teaspoon of black pepper. It's depending on how you like your pepper or not. Or 1 teaspoon. And now we're going to add about 1 tablespoon of Jamaican allspice. Now I had bought the full kernels, the full whole Jamaican allspice kind of kernel. And I had to kind of grind this myself down to this powder. And I used my trusty NutriBullet to make it a fine powder that I can now add to my recipe. So you want to put in 1 tablespoon of that. And it's a very strong seasoning. So that's going to really step up the flavor a good amount too. And now we're going to add about 1 tablespoon of onion powder. Right? And with that, we have all of our fresh chopped vegetables here, and we're going to now add those to our mix, or a good portion of them anyway. All right? Add all of these in, our tomatoes, our green peppers, our red peppers, parsley, thyme. I'm going to add all of this to it. Our diced tomatoes. All this is going in. Because what we're going to do is mix this real good, and then we're going to set it overnight. And that's the key. When we set this to marinate overnight, all of these very, very rich, fragrant herbs and spices are going to meld into that meat really nicely, those oxtails. So once again, we're going to get our hands into this, right, and mix this all around very well. We want an even distribution as best as we can get it. And once we get that distribution, we're going to cover this and set it in the fridge overnight. And I'll be right back to show you what the product looks like, or the final result looks like, as we set it to rest overnight. All right, and that's basically what the finished product looks like after we finish fully seasoning it. We're going to put it in the fridge overnight. We're going to cover it with some plastic wrap and set it in to rest overnight. And, we will go from there. Now, the key aspect of the oxtails is not so much the seasoning, but it's basically what goes into the cooking and the simmering, the thickening and browning of the oxtails themselves, and more importantly, the gravy. That will come when we fire this video back up tomorrow, and we'll see you then. And so now we've got the saran wrap nicely placed over the top, nice and taut, because we don't want any of the flavor escaping. It's nice and taut. And now we're going to put these delicious oxtails to Betty by to soak up all of this rich seasoning herbs and flavor. And we'll be back. Okay, so we've taken the liberty of food processing and mincing all of the herbs and vegetables that you saw in the opening sequence, the parsley and the green peppers and the onions and all the rest of the stuff. We've basically really got it down to a nice puree in the food processor, and we have placed it in the jar. We stored it in the jar, and we're going to be using some of what we've blended down and what we pureed down back into our sauce to further flavor the oxtails and flavor the gravy as well. So I just wanted to show you guys that you have that option available too. Those of you who want or decide that you want to kind of just food process your seasonings all together and blend it in at one particular time. All right, so we're back now, and the oxtails have marinated for well overnight, well over 12, 13 hours. So what we're going to do now is take off our saran wrap or plastic wrap, and we're going to basically begin the process of flouring the oxtails to brown them in our olive oil, just like a tablespoon or two of olive oil. Now, I recognize in traditional recipes, oftentimes people will not flour their oxtails. And in fact, I noticed that in most southern dishes, you have the southerners that dust their oxtails in flour. But in the traditional recipes, you really don't do that. I am going to do it because my understanding is it'll keep the form of the oxtails. I have the larger ones here. I want them extremely tender, but I don't want them to fall off the bone. And I also understand it's going to help to make for a more richer and thicker gravy as they're all simmering down in the pot. So the first thing we're basically going to do is to just kind of get all of the extra little vegetables off of these, because you don't want those being sauteed either, because they'll burn as we're browning the oxtails. And again, it's not important to basically completely get those all drenched in flour like we would do fried chicken, for example. It's not necessary, because all we're going to do is just brown these a little bit. So you don't have to get every single, centimeter of the oxtail covered. So what we're going to do, we're going to just go ahead and gently roll these in our flour, and then we're going to go fire up the stove, and we're going to begin the process of browning these. And we'll be back. Alrighty, so we have knocked off all of the vegetables off of the oxtails that were seasoning on it overnight in the fridge. Because again, as we dusted them lightly in flour, and these oxtails are lightly dusted, again, and not like chicken wings or chicken parts or pork chops where you want to completely drench and dredge the meat in the flour to get that nice crisp outside. These are we just want to brown these, basically. So after we've knocked off all of the residual vegetables and herbs that were on them, this is what remains of what we seasoned the oxtails in overnight. And you can draw in close there and really get a good look at it. And we're going to come back to this. It's made some really nice juice at the bottom because the vegetables, they really saturated and, came back with the liquid that's going to be very, very important for the flavoring of the gravy. Now, I was actually toying with the idea of blending these vegetables down and these seasonings down with the food processor and adding everything in one fell swoop. But I don't think I'm going to do that. I'm going to use half of these vegetables for the initial cooking down of the sauce and the oxtails, and I'm going to save the back half portion for later on towards the end of the cooking, because I want that flavoring to be distributed throughout. I want some of it to kind of get in there and kind of really meld into the meat as we're cooking and browning the oxtails, but I also want to keep some measure of these vegetables for the back end to get that real good pungent punch. So at this point, we're going to now go over and start up the stove. We're going to put a little olive oil in there, and we're going to begin to brown these oxtails, and we will come back to these vegetables later. First of all, we're going to use the non-stick pot because basically as we saute the oxtails, they have a tendency to stick because we're really going to try to get a good crusty browning on them. And a non-stick pot is not a bad thing to use, although again, traditionally you can use a stainless steel pot. But we're going to go very, very lightly on the olive oil. Not much at all. And as a matter of fact, that's got to be maybe teaspoon, 2 teaspoons. And as a matter of fact, you have a lot of folks who actually will use butter to brown their oxtails. I'm not going down that path this time. I'm going to remain more traditional. With that, we're going to fire up the burner. We're going to keep it at medium. Just coat the bottom of this a little bit to get these oxtails nice and brown. And then we'll be back when we're ready to put them in. All right, so the oil is nice and hot. And again, we use just a very, very sparing amount of it. And we're going to go right ahead and begin to brown the larger oxtails first, because we have quite a few here. And I want to get the big boys out of the way first. Yes, I might have enough room to get quite a few in. Let's see. And you hear that crackle, you hear that snap and that pop. That's what you want to hear as you're getting these babies ready to brown down. Now, some people actually will brown. There's recipes that you can use where you can brown your oxtail by using sugar. You can put white sugar, not brown sugar, white sugar in the pot, and the white sugar will caramelize completely, turning a rich, dark brown. And then you can brown your oxtails in the white sugar that has caramelized on the heat. And that's also another way where you can kind of impact the color of your meat without adding the gravy brown, the gravy master and all the other browning agents that we have used. But again, I'm just going to go with the more conventional way, the light dusting of the flour and the traditional olive oil. But don't sleep that. You can certainly use white sugar, which will make a wonderful, rich browning agent. And we'll brown these a little bit. We're going to turn them on all sides. We're going to get them nice and browned up. And we'll get back to you when we're ready to show you what the finished process looks like. And we're just part way of the browning. You can see it's kind of browning up really nice. We're moving these oxtails around. And again, we're not cooking. We're not even trying to we're just braising these basically. We're just braising them so that when we make our juice, our gravy, these will have a nice, braised outer coating to them. And they're browning up nicely. I just wanted to bring you back so you can see the process by which we're looking to get to the end to. And we'll bring you back when we're just about finished browning these. Okay, so we've got a nice browned product here. The oxtails look really, really good. Now, I'm going to do my own little technique. Now we're going to put in 2 cups of fluid. I'm going with half a cup of chicken broth. And again, if you have beef broth, it will probably be even better, but chicken broth is fine. I don't have any beef broth. Stir these a little bit more. And then I'm going to add in another cup of hot water. And when you're adding the liquid, whether it's broth or water, to your oxtails, you want to add it when it's hot, because that's gonna help to continue to cook the meat, but also at the same time tenderize the meat. And we're going to turn our heat back up a little bit to about medium. Now, some people would cover the oxtails completely and throw the vegetables in right away. I'm going to let this simmer a little bit and just kind of soak up some of the juices of not only the water to continue to tenderize the meat that's been very well braised, but also to flavor it. And I'll add the remainder of the broth and the water as we move along. So if you can see, we're getting back to a little boil over here. And basically that's what we want to do. We're going to bring this back up to a little bit of a slow boil and let this meat just tenderize and all of these good juices. Now the flour acts as a thickening agent. The flour that we actually lightly dredged the oxtails in is going to thicken up this fluid, this broth and water, and it's going to begin to make the beginnings of a really nice consistent gravy, which is also very much what we're looking for by the time we're all said and done. Okay, it's 15 minutes later, and I want to just, for edification, some people at this stage of the oxtail cooking tip the top of the pot like this, just to let it crack, to let the steam kind of release. I completely keep it covered. They cover it later on down the line in the cooking, but I like to keep it covered completely because I actually have this little, this kind of exhaust valve right here, and that's giving me the same effect. But it's time to check our oxtails, and they are doing right nice. You see that water has reduced to some degree. And now what we're going to do, again, I've got my heat just slightly lower than medium, and it's time to turn these oxtails. And if you can really see, if you can get in there, again, that flour that we lightly rolled the oxtails in has really gone a long way already to creating a thickness to the gravy. As it boils, it'll thicken. And so we're not even near finished putting in the amount of liquid that has to go in here. So we're going to turn these. It looks like they're already shrinking off the bone a little bit. They're getting more tenderized, and that's basically what we want. So now what we're going to do, we're going to reintroduce the vegetables that they marinated in last night. And again, we've got a nice amount of liquid. You can see that liquid in the bottom there, right? We want that juice, we want that in there. And we're going to put in half of the vegetables now. And we're going to come back and put the other half in later on down the line. But the juice is definitely going to go in now. And the whole place smells beautiful. I mean, I wish you could smell what it smells like in here. It's really great. Now these veggies are going to cook down and reduce and actually become a part of the broth or the gravy, because we're going to cook these boys for another few hours. At this point also, this is where we talked about when we used the food processor last night and pureed these exact same seasonings. We're going to add a nice heaping teaspoon like so. Again, this is kind of a concentrated dose of the seasoning that we're going to get in to our gravy at this point. And before we finish that, again, we've got another cup because the water's boiled down. The gravy is getting thicker. And we don't want it to get too thick too quick. So what we're going to do, we're going to add another cup of hot chicken broth. And we're going to come back shortly after this, and we're going to begin to start adding a little bit of water until we can get everything where we want it. But again, I just want to make the point that the good thing about this is that a lot of these recipes you see, even at this point, the water is very, very thick. The juice is the juice is very, very thin and runny and watery. But already at this point, you can see where the starch in the flour has really helped to augment the thickness of where our gravy is going to be in the end. So we're just going to give this a real good stir, right? We're going to keep our heat just at about medium or slightly less. And we're going to let this cook down some more. And we'll be back to show you what that looks like. All right, it's about 15 minutes later. We're coming back to check on our oxtails. And as you can see, again, it's boiling nicely. And some of the gravy's been reduced and boiled down, and it's going to be time to add some more. But you can see those vegetables have already kind of reduced into the gravy to a good degree and are almost gone. So what we're going to do now, we're giving everything a good turn. Nice turn. And back in my microwave with another cup of heated chicken broth. And that's going to go in to continue to cook these oxtails down. Give a nice stir. And they're looking really, really good. You can see they're really coming along, they're getting there. So we've given this a good stir. Going to probably add a little bit more water later on down the line, but also we've also put our rice on. So the rice is boiling nicely. We're going to just stir that a little bit because I'm going to have the oxtails with rice and the butter beans as well. We're going all out here. And we'll be back in the next segment, probably about another 15 minutes, and we'll check and see where we're at. Alright, so we're back to check on our oxtails, and they're coming along just lovely. It's basically a really good royal boil. It's roiling and boiling, and this is what we want. I added a little water off camera, and now I'm going for the final and the last of the chicken stock, because all of the low juice cooking was basically to get the flavor in. And now I'm going to go for the tenderizing of these big pieces of oxtail. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to set it on for about another hour, because these things take a total of about 3 hours. Now the book says 3 to 3.5 hours. This could actually go 4 hours depending on the tenderness that you're looking for. But again, the book does say about 3.5 hours. I have a sneaking suspicion this is going to go for another hour and a half, 2 hours at least. So we're stirring good. It just smells like paradise in here. I can't really put it any other way. The seasonings are just, they permeate every orifice and every sensory tactile sense that you have. It's beautiful to the sight, beautiful to the smell, beautiful to the taste. These are outstanding seasonings, and what's quite interesting about this, as we put the top back on the simmer, we still have the remainder of our vegetables that we sauteed or that we marinated last night to go. And I've also cut some fresh carrots, which are not quite as soft because I don't want them to lose their texture at the tail end of this, because I want to be able to bite into the carrots as a vegetable along with the lima beans at the back end. So we have, again, the rest of our vegetables and herbs and spices that we marinated the meat in yesterday, and that's going to go in probably in the next hour. Alrighty, and we're back, and we're going to check in on our, ooh, yeah. This is really coming along. Just look at those. Look at those tails. I'd say these are coming along just splendidly. And again, I mean, I cannot stress or highlight enough how wonderful this smells. And again, you know, we have a nice thickness of gravy, and we got about another hour to go. So what we're going to do at this point, because the water once again has boiled down and we're in the process of tenderizing the bigger pieces of the oxtail. So at this point I'm going to add another bit of our pureed seasoning from last night. And we're going to just put this right here, a little bit. And we're going to put in, we've got this water already heating in our teapot. We're going to measure it out to 2 cups. In our measuring cup, you see the steam coming off. You see the steam coming off the water there? If you can see it, I'm not sure if you can. But we've got it heated already. We're basically done with the broth. And we're going to add in the next 2 cups of water. And this should basically bring us home. This should basically bring us where we need to be at the tail end. We're going to stir this up one time. And you know, those concentrated herbs going in here like that really act like another plating of the diced, you know, parsley and carrots and onions and stuff. It's really a very concentrated dose of seasoning. So that's going to go in at this point as well. And our gravy looks nice and thick. But this should bring us basically home. The meat should be nice and tender by the time we finish up here. At that point, we're going to add the back end of the vegetables that we had left over, as we talked about. The raw carrots, which are not softened, because we're going to let those cook up nicely and act as part of our vegetables. And then we're going to add the butter beans. I said lima beans last time, but I've got my sense together now. So we're going to put the butter beans in at the end. And again, we're just going to let this cook down. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. That, you know, a lot of times the folks will tell you that you have to use 4 cups of water, 4.5 cups of water, 4.5 cups of broth, or only, you know, 3 hours. You got to really kind of do this to your liking, and you got to watch it. I mean, it's just it's a sense of where you want your oxtails to be, the thickness of gravy and the tenderness of the meat. And I don't think you can really put a static time or amount to this, because kind of every preparation is a little bit different. So we'll throw the top back on. We've reduced the heat just slightly. And let's see where we're at when we come back. And we're back again, and about 45 minutes has gone by, and we're checking the oxtails. And man, you see, let's take a look at this. You see how the bone is beginning to come through and show there? That's basically what you want. You see how the meat is shrinking up on the bone? And raising up. The meat's very tender to the touch. You can see that, how, bring in closer, how that bone is basically showing. And that's how you know we're nice and tender and where we basically want to be. So at this point, we're ready to add in the rest of our ingredients, because we're going to bring it on home now. And with that, we're going to add the rest of the vegetables that we have here. And we're going to just add those in. We're going to add those in. And what this is going to do is basically give us these fresh seasonings that have not cooked into the gravy, but will be a part now of the finishing seasoning that will really shine through. That's going to give it this real punch of flavor, because we're doing the last of these seasonings fresh. And we're going to cook this in, getting every last little bit of this, of these veggies here. The last little bit of juice, and last onion. And then on top of that, we're going to give this just one last shot of ketchup. Maybe 2 teaspoons. And we're going to now bring all this home, and probably, you know, part of also ketchup and the tomatoes. You know, some people use tomato paste, some people use crushed tomatoes out of the can. I dice my tomatoes, and I'm using the ketchup in the recipe because most everybody knows that tomatoes act as a tenderizer for meat. So that's why I'm adding it on the back end here, to just add the finishing touches on the tenderization of this meat. And look at this. Just look at this here. Look how that meat is ready to fall off. You see that? We're basically done here. You see, look at that. Look how that bone is coming through. But the beauty of this is that because I floured the meat, it's keeping it together in its substance so that it's not falling off and all the little pieces aren't falling off all over into the gravy. Some people like that, but what I like is when I pick up the bone, I have that tender meat fall off the bone as I bite into it. Not that I've got to pick it out of the gravy. So we're doing some gentle stirring here. Again, the carrots are going in. The carrots should tenderize a little bit just to the point where they don't dissolve, but that they get nice and soft, because we're going to be eating those for vegetables, as I've already said. And in about 20 minutes, look how nice and thick our gravy is. We've got really beautiful gravy here, which is going to be perfectly suitable for our rice. Oh man, you know, that's really excellent. Maybe we can add a dash of salt to that, but that's excellent. And our rice is done. Just waiting patiently for the rest of this. I'm going to give this a shot of salt. Just a quick shot. And a quick stir and turn. And we're off to the races, y'all. Look at that. This is where you want to be. Your oxtails. All right, so we're going to put the top back on. We're going to give this about the final 20 minutes. And at that point, we're going to take off, we're going to use probably 1 can of beans, 1 can of butter beans. And some recipes call for you to actually use the juice or the water that the beans are packed in. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to run off the water and just put the beans in and of themselves. And the beans basically don't need that much cooking anyway. So we will give that in 20 minutes. We will add the beans to the dish. We'll give that probably another 5 or 10 minutes to cook down. Let it set a minute, and we will plate our food and see where we're at. All right, so now we're in the home stretch. And I'm just checking. A very gentle turn, because these oxtails are very tender, and we don't want to bust them up and break them up. And the carrots are pretty soft. And so now we're going to add our beans. And again, I've said we've drained them. We've drained them, and they're going to go into this pot and cook these just a bit. Probably another 10 minutes, and it'll be din-din time. I think I got it all out. And we will come back and check this in about 10 minutes, and we'll plate up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, and there you have it. We have Rapid Rods Jamaican style oxtails. We've got a little white rice, some nice butter beans, and now we're going to go in for the determining factor. Fork only, no knife. And let's just see, let me try one of these beans. Oh, nice. Nice texture, not too undercooked, not too overcooked. And let's see where we're at. Oh, look at that meat. See how that meat falls off the bone? That meat, just look at that. No knife, no nothing. Look at that. Look how that meat comes off. Look how that meat. I just twirl it right off the bone. Oh yeah. Let me get in here. That meat is just so tender. A really good looking piece. So, look at that. Look how tender it is. That's what we want. And, oh my God. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap. We're shutting it down right here. Because we're going to grit and grease. I'm going to knock these bad boys out. Jamaican style oxtails. Wow. These are beyond splendid. So, I know this is a long video, but I really wanted to do it an instructional, step-by-step methodology, how to get it done. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please subscribe, hit that thumbs up, hit that bell so that you know the next time I have a recipe on the online, it'll send you a message. And with that, I just want to say bon appetit as I take another bite. Oh, let me get some of this rice. Rice, a bean or two in there. And, oh man, that gravy. Oh, wow. You know what? If I didn't know better, I think I was from the island of the grill, man. Have a great night, ladies and gentlemen.